Hey fourth graders, it's Mrs. Long again, and today we are going to work on putting data onto a line plot and into a stem and leaf plot. So yesterday in your lessons you learned what data is, and we learned how to read the data if it is already represented in the line plot or in the stem and leaf plot. But today what we're going to do is actually work on making those pieces of data representation so that you are able to not only make them but then read them. Okay, so right here we have an example of some data. If we read, it says the students in Mrs. Holbrook's class were growing plants. One day they measure the heights of the plants in inches. The heights are shown below. Make a line plot to represent the data. Now they didn't, I don't have a ton of space here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to label my line plot with a couple of things. We would give it a title, and we might want to call it like Mrs. Holbrook's plants or something like that, but there's just not really space up here. But down here I will write height in inches, because it is important to label the line itself as well, so that way you know what this data is that's down here. And remember, each of these is going to get an X on top of the line plot. But we also notice that right here I just have a 1 and a 3, and it does tell me in the instructions that each of these little lines or ticks represents 1/8. So like this would be 1 and 1/8, for example, 1 and 2/8, 1 and 3/8. But I'm not going to write all of those on there just because it's going to make the line plot look very cluttered. Okay, so I'm going to count over. Remember, when we're doing fractions on a number line, this is kind of going all the way back to when you were talking about fractions. Everything we're doing in math all relates to each other, doesn't it? All right, so when we're learning fractions on a number line, each of these stands for an eighth. So this is 1 and 1/8, 1 and 2/8, 1 and 3/8. I am going to label this one 1 and 4/8, 1 and 5/8, 1 and 6/8, 1 and 7/8. This would be the number 2, the whole number 2. All right, 2 and 1/8, 2 and 2/8, 2 and 3/8. This is going to be 2 and 4/8, or 2 and a half, 2 and 5/8, 2 and 6/8, 2 and 7/8, and then 3. Okay, one thing I do like to do when I'm looking at line plots with fractions is I like to put a box around my whole numbers. This is not a requirement by any stretch of the imagination, but it does kind of help those holes to stand out once you have all of this information. Now, when I'm looking at my data, I do notice that I have some different denominators. Do you guys see that? Because like here, for example, this is 1 and 3/4. Here I have 1 and a half, 1 and 1/4. So I want to remember my equivalent fractions, okay? I'm going to write this up here. So anytime I see 1/2, remember I want the denominator to be an 8. Well, 2 times 4 equals 8. What I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So that would be the same as 4/8. I see a 1/4. Remember, I want the denominator to be 8, because that's what all of the other ones are. So what I do to the bottom, oops, this time I have to do it times 2. I do to the top. All right, and then the same thing for 3/4. Okay, I want the denominator to be an 8. 4 times 2 equals 8, so I have to multiply the top times 2. 3 times 2 is 6. So anytime I see, for example, 1/4, I know 1/4 is the same as 2/8. Anytime I see 1/2, that's the same as 4/8. And anytime I see 3/4, that's the same as 6/8. That's going to be really helpful for us. How did I know to pick 8 as my denominator? I picked the biggest number. Now, one thing that's really going to be helpful for you guys to just know with line plots, you're only going to have halves, fourths, and eighths this year. So you're not going to have any other denominators to worry about. So if you just memorize this, that's going to be really helpful for you. Okay, now I'm going to put the data onto the line plot. And it's pretty simple. I'm going to use a different color just to help everything be able to be read easier. I'm just simply going to go through here, and I'm going to find where it is on here, and I put an X on top. You want to keep all of your X's about the same size, right? Because you don't want one column to look taller just simply because it has bigger x's, right? You want to keep it all about the same size, but each x is going to represent one of the plants. So here I have a plant that's 2 5/8. So I go after the 2, and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/8 over, and I put an X. And then I'm going to cross it off because I used it. I don't want to forget what I've already put on. All right, 1 5/8. So I go after the 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/8. Cross it off. 2 1/8. So here's the 2, and this is 1/8. Remember, each of these is counting by eighths. 1 3/4. Remember, we said 3/4 is the same as 6/8, so this is the same as 1 6/8. I can write that underneath just so I can remember. All right, and so that's going to go 1 after the 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6/8. And I'm just going to keep going through the data points like this. So 2 3/8. It goes after the 2, and I'm going to go over 3/8. 1, 2, 3. Put my X. 1 7/8. So it goes after the 1. The whole number tells us which whole number it comes after. The fraction tells us how many ticks to go over. So after the 1, I'm going to go over 7/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2 7/8. So after the 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, this is 2 1/8. After the 2, I'm going to go over 1/8. Now, because there's already an X there, this X has to go on top of it. You don't put it next to it or anywhere else. It has to go on top, just like that. Okay, so if I have a repeating number, every time that number repeats, I have to put another X on top of it. All right, this is 2, and there's no fractions, which means it goes right over the 2 holes. 2 3/8, so here's 2, 1, 2, 3. Again, I have another one already there, so I have to put it on top. 1 1/4. Remember, 1/4 is the same thing as 2/8, so that's the same thing as saying 1 2/8. So I'm going to go over, it comes after the 1, and I'm going to go over 1 2/8. All right, 2 3/4. That's the same thing as 2 6/8. All right, so I'm going to go after the 2 and count over 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6/8. Cross that one off. 1 1/2. That's the same thing as 1 4/8. And again, I'm using my little chart that I made over here to help me out with that. So I'm going to go over here, and I actually have that labeled so I don't have to count because I wrote that on there. 1 7/8. So after the 1, and I'm going to go over 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Goes right there. All right. Oops, I went over that way, but this is also 1 7/8. I literally just found it, so I'm going to just put another X there. 2 1/2 is the same as 2 4/8. 2 4/8. So that's right there. That's on my number line. 2 3/4 is the same thing as 2 6/8. All right, so I'm going to go after the 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, 1 7/8. I go after the 1, and I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, it looks like that's a pretty popular height, doesn't it? It looks like there's a lot that were that. 1 3/4. Remember, that's the same thing as 1 6/8. So I'm going to go after the 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I have one more piece of data, 1 5/8. So after the 1, and I'm going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, everything's on there, and I know that because I crossed it off as I went, so that makes that really easy. Okay, now I can answer some questions about my data. Which height is the most common? Most common means it has the most X's. Most common, most X's. Well, which height has the most X's? That was 1 7/8 inches, because it has the most X's. All right, Now it says describe how to make a line plot with data that includes fractions, right? We make a fraction number line. We make a fraction number line. All right, now we have a data set below. My camera up here. There we go. All right, I want you to pause and make a number line for this data set. It has a lot less than the one that we just did. I'm going to show you kind of how to start. All right, we're going to look at our whole numbers. That's going to kind of tell us what whole numbers. We have a 9, 10, and we have some that are bigger than 10. So my smallest is going to be 9. 10 is going to be right in the middle. And 11, because there's some that are bigger than 10, so that means that it's between 10 and 11, is at the end. I'm going to put a little box around each, and I'm going to split, because my denominator, my biggest denominator is an 8, I'm going to split this into 8 sections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You may be saying, Mrs. Long, why did you only say 7? I said you were saying 8 sections. Remember, the sections are the spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I was good. All right, this is 9 and 1/8, 9 and 2/8, 9 and 3/8. I'm going to go ahead and label 9 and 4/8. Make my whole number a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to label 10 and 1/8, 2/8, 3/8. This is 10 and 4/8. Now you can label every single little tick if you want to. However, it makes it very jumbled, especially when you have all these fractions. So I really highly recommend leaving it looking like this. Also, this might be more likely what you would see if you see a line plot versus one where every single tick is labeled. So that is just something to keep in mind. Also, remember our equivalent fractions that we found up here. I'm about to get to the point where you can pause the video. Okay, so give me just one more second here. 1/4. Remember, if we want it to have an 8 as the denominator, we multiply the numerator and denominator by 2. 1/2. If we want the 8 to be the denominator, we have to multiply the numerator and the denominator by 4. And 3/4 is the same thing as 6/8, which we found up at the top. Okay, so go ahead, pause the video, and make your line plot. After you have finished with that, come back and join me and see if your line plot matches mine. All right, so go ahead and pause your video right now. Okay, so welcome back. Here we have the line plot completed. You notice that I crossed off again as I added my things on, and remember this is 9 and 1/8, 9 and 2/8, 9 and 3/8, 9 and 4/8, 9 and 5/8, 9 and 6/8, 9 and 7/8, 10, 10 and 1/8, 10 and 2/8, 10 and 3/8, 10 and 4/8, 10 and 5/8, 10 and 6/8, 10 and 7/8, 11, right? And we start counting our 8s, 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, whole. 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, whole. You can make it a song and start dancing around your house singing it, and your parents will think you're crazy. So there you have it. Okay, now we can even use our line plot because it's finished to answer a question. How many fish are less than 10 inches long? That's everybody that's on that side of 10. Okay, how many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, now let's take a look at making a stem and leaf plot. All right, we're actually only going to use, get rid of that paper. We're only going to use this top bit. Stem and leaf plots are kind of weird, like we've talked about, but they're not too hard to make. Okay, in fact, they're a little bit easier to make than the line plots. Stem and leaf plots are usually dealing with whole numbers, so that makes it a little bit easier. Remember the tens place, the stem is the tens place. I'm going to write that over here to the side. And the leaves are the ones place, and they do have to go in order. So basically what we want to do is look at our data right here. This is tickets sold for basketball games, and we want to find the smallest number. The smallest number I see is 21. Okay, so that means that my smallest 10 is going to be a 2. I do see numbers in the 3s, and I do see numbers in the 4s. Okay, so we have, those are our stems. Now we have to put in our leaves, and again, we do have to go in order from smallest to biggest. So I'm going to start out with my 20s. My smallest 20 is 21, and again, I cross it off, and remember, you just put the 1, and then you put a comma. All right, I see a 27 here. Let's see here. I see 28, so I'm going to circle them just to make them easier to see. 28, and I see another 27. So what I have to do is I do 20, because 27 is the smaller, next smallest number, so I do 27. There's another 27, so I put another 7. And then I put the 8 for 28. All right, now I'm moving into my 30s. Okay, I'm going to switch, no, I'm not. I was going to switch colors, but now I'm not. All right, I'm going to circle all my numbers in my 30s. So I have 33, 37, 36, 37. The smallest is 33. So I write my 3. Then I have 36. And I have 2 37s, which means I put 2 7s for the 2 7s. All right, the numbers left are my 40s. I want you to pause the video and fill in the last line of leaves for your stem and leaf plot. Go ahead and pause the video now to fill it in. All right, here we have it. Does yours match mine? We had 41, so we put 40, the 1 here, 45, 46, there it is, and 48. All right, and that is how you make a stem and leaf plot. Pretty easy to make, a little bit more complicated to read, but as long as you're remembering that you have the numbers in order from the smallest number is going to be right here to the biggest number right here with 48. You separating your 10s and your 1s, and every time you see the number, it has to be, you have to write it over in the 1s time. So even if it's repeated number, you still have to make a leaf for each piece of data. Okay? All right, guys, I hope that helps you out. Go ahead and work on your assignment for today. If you need help, come back to this video and look back at how to make the stem and leaf plots, and I will see you guys tomorrow.